In 7th grade, I went on a field trip I'll never forget for all the wrong reasons. Our class was visiting the Shed Aquarium of the Smokies in Chicago, a big end-of-the-year thing. We were just kids, excited to escape school for a day and explore the giant fish tanks, laugh with friends, and take way too many pictures. My science teacher, Mr. Russo, was our chaperone, and he was the kind of teacher everyone liked. Easygoing, never yelled, never cared if you whispered during class. On a field trip, that translated to one thing: freedom. Too much freedom. My friend Aiden and I didn't feel like waiting around while the teachers organized all the groups in the lobby, so we slipped away, quietly, just walked off into the aquarium's dimly lit corridors. Since our school had rented out the place for the morning, the aquarium was nearly empty. We had it all to ourselves. It was peaceful, almost surreal. Just us, the glow of the giant tanks, and the shadows of fish moving like ghosts behind glass. We wandered through rooms filled with blue light, pointing out fish from Finding Nemo, and making dumb jokes to keep ourselves entertained. Then we heard it, a voice. "Hey." We turned. A man in cargo shorts and a green t-shirt stood a few feet behind us. He looked like someone who worked there, maybe. Lanyard, short beard, baseball cap, pretty standard. "You two at the field trip?" he asked, his tone sharp and serious. I was about to say no, because we technically weren't with our group, when Aiden quickly said, "Yeah." The man nodded. "Come with me." We followed. Why? I don't know. Maybe because we were 7th graders and he spoke like he had authority, or maybe because we were scared we'd get in trouble and assumed he was staff. But instead of leading us back to the lobby, he took us down a side hallway, narrow, dark, not well lit. We passed bathrooms, then empty employee doors, and eventually stopped at an exit sign, hanging over a plain gray door. He opened it, and we stepped out into a back parking lot that led to a tree-lined area behind the building. I finally asked, "Do you work here?" "Yeah," he said, not even looking back. "Gotta drive you around to the front to get let back in." Even then, that explanation didn't make much sense, but our stomachs were already tight with anxiety. Maybe this was what happened when you got caught sneaking off. Maybe they made you report in at the front office again. We didn't know. When we got to his car, he unlocked the doors. We got in the back. The second those doors shut behind us, I felt wrong, caged, like we just made the worst mistake of our lives. He pulled out of the lot and reached the main road. Then, instead of turning right toward the front of the aquarium, he turned left. Both Aiden and I immediately tensed up. "Where are we going?" I asked. No answer. Then we heard the locks click. He'd activated child safety locks from the front seat. That's when he said it. "If either of you try anything stupid, I'll kill you." Just like that. No emotion. And then he reached into his glove compartment and pulled something out. A big knife. He held it in his lap. Silent threat. In that moment, I don't even think I was breathing. Neither of us said a word. We just sat frozen, the sound of the tires against the road, the only thing we could hear. He drove us uphill into a woodsy neighborhood, isolated, no people around, no traffic, the kind of place where screams would disappear into the trees. Finally, he pulled over on the shoulder. No houses nearby, just empty woods. "Out," he said to me. He opened my door, still gripping the knife. I stepped out, shaking. He shut the door behind me and turned to Aiden inside the car. "If you want him alive," he said, "you'll be in this car when I get back." Then he started walking me toward the trees. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't cry. I couldn't scream. I could barely think. Then I saw Aiden through the car window. He was sliding across the seat, unlocking the opposite door. His face was pale, but determined. He was going to run. And in a split second, I knew we had to move. Now I screamed, "Run!" Aiden exploded out of the car and bolted downhill. I didn't wait for the man to react. I took off after him, sprinting full speed, heart slamming in my ears, the wind stinging my eyes. I heard the man shout something behind us. Then came the whistle of something slicing through the air. He'd thrown the knife. I felt it pass close, too close. It clattered to the ground ahead of us. We didn't stop. Didn't even look back. We kept running. Eventually, we made it to a side street and found our way back near the aquarium. By some miracle, we slipped back inside through a side entrance and rejoined the group. Mr. Russo didn't even notice we were gone. We didn't tell anyone. Not that day, not that week, not even that year. We were scared, embarrassed, and the truth was, we didn't think anyone would believe us. But as we got older, the weight of that day never left. We escaped something evil, something real, a man whose intentions we can only guess, and who we never saw again. Sometimes I lie in bed and replay the moment those locks clicked shut, and I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't run. When I was in 8th grade, the trip we all looked forward to wasn't some amusement park or a beach getaway. It was Washington, D.C. There was something about the idea of traveling with friends, staying in a hotel, riding around in those coach buses, and pretending to be adults for a weekend that just made us feel free. It was like stepping out of our boring school lives and into something bigger. By the time we got there, our group, about 100 of us, was divided into 3 sections, each with its own bus, itinerary, and hotel chaperones. We toured the usual stuff: national monuments, war memorials, old battlegrounds, museums. The days were long, but they flew by because we were constantly moving. Then came the night that changed everything. Our teachers decided to cap off the weekend with something fun: a colonial ghost tour. Just a little nighttime walk through one of the nearby historical towns. Old homes, narrow streets, ancient cemeteries. It sounded cool in theory, but I wasn't big on anything supernatural. I figured we'd just walk around, hear a few stories, maybe get spooked once or twice by a jumpy tour guide. I was wrong. That night, we were split into smaller walking groups, maybe 10 people per guide. Our group was mostly kids from my hotel room block, including my friend Jessica, who I was sharing a room with on the trip. The town itself felt like a movie set: dim streetlights, cobblestone paths, rows of colonial homes preserved to look exactly like they did hundreds of years ago. Everything about it gave off an energy that was too quiet, too still. Our guide was this older woman who clearly loved history more than storytelling. She told us not to expect much, that most nights were uneventful, and ghosts didn't really care about tourists. She said it like a joke, but her tone was a little too dry. We moved from house to house, listening to the backgrounds of each one: who lived there, what they did for work, who died and when. Some of the homes had tragic histories: mothers who lost children, soldiers who never came back, couples who mysteriously vanished. The usual ghost story ingredients. As we approached a smaller 2-story house in the middle of a block, I noticed something strange. The windows had this faint blue glow behind them. Not a light exactly, more like a bluish haze, like the kind of reflection you'd see from old glass or moonlight through fog. It was subtle, but enough to give the whole house a ghostly vibe. Our guide stopped us in front of it. She started explaining the house's history. It belonged to a man and his wife. They were deeply in love. When the wife got pregnant, they were overjoyed. But shortly after giving birth to a daughter, the wife passed away due to complications. The man was devastated. According to records, he never recovered from the loss. He grew distant, cold, even resentful. His daughter reminded him too much of his wife, and instead of raising her with love, he raised her with bitterness, kept her hidden inside the house, isolated. She grew up believing she was ugly, useless. The only thing her father ever praised was her hands. So, she spent her time upstairs, learning how to sew and weave day in and day out. As the guide finished the story, I remember feeling sick, not from fear, but from sorrow. I could picture her up there, sitting by a window, working on a loom while her father drank himself into silence below. Jessica took a picture of the house. Then we moved on, but she didn't follow. A few steps later, I realized she had stopped walking. She was staring down at her digital camera. I walked back to her and asked what was wrong. "Look at this," she whispered. I leaned over to see the screen. The photo was of the house, just as we saw it, but something was off. There was a small light in one of the second-floor windows. "Zoom in," I said. She did, and what we saw made my stomach drop. There were 3 figures in the window. Not just shapes, not just shadows. Figures. On the far right, you could see a translucent outline of a woman, standing slightly forward. Her features were faint, but she had what looked like shoulder-length hair and a white garment, maybe a nightgown. Behind her was a man. He was taller, standing stiff, like he was watching from behind. His face was hard to make out, but the outline of his shoulders and posture were unmistakably male. But what disturbed us most was the third figure. To the far left, barely visible, was the outline of another woman. She was harder to define, almost as if her body was there, but her skin and face weren't. A shape more than a person, but she was definitely there. Neither of us said anything at first, just stared. Then I raised my hand and asked the guide a question. Did anyone else live in that house besides the man and his daughter? The guide paused. Her eyes narrowed. Then she nodded slowly. Yes, they had a black female servant who lived in the home with them for several years, she said. She passed away not long after the daughter did. Jessica and I looked at each other. 3 people. The father, the daughter, and someone who no one had mentioned until now. We didn't talk much for the rest of the tour. Back at the hotel, we showed the photo to a few classmates. Some thought it was fake. Others said it was just reflections or camera glare. But we knew what we saw, and we still have that photo. Over time, we both stopped showing it to people. Not because we were scared of being called liars, but because we weren't sure what it even meant. Why were they still there? Why that night? Why did Jessica's camera catch them when nobody else did? There's something deeply unsettling about knowing that behind the glass of that old colonial home. Something was watching us, and it was real enough to leave behind a reflection. By senior year of high school, most field trips felt routine. Museums, courtrooms, local campuses, it was the usual stuff. Nothing exciting, nothing memorable. But our forensics teacher, Mr. Stevenson, had a different idea. He convinced the school to let him take us on a field trip to an abandoned building in the woods. According to him, it used to be a major drug den. The place was involved in a string of serious crimes years ago, and he swore it was an educational opportunity for us to study the environment firsthand. I still don't know how he got the school to sign off on it. We all thought he was joking until the buses showed up and drove us down a narrow road surrounded by dense forest. You wouldn't even notice the road unless you were looking for it. Grass and weeds had completely overgrown the pavement. It felt like we were driving straight into nowhere. When we got out, the building looked wrong. 8 stories tall, towering above the tree line, but crooked somehow, like it wasn't built to last. Chunks of the facade were missing. The windows were either broken or gone. There was graffiti on every reachable surface. The entire place looked like it had been swallowed by time, spit out and forgotten. Mr. Stevenson stood in front of us like a tour guide and launched into a full lecture. This building, he said, was never completed. Original purpose is unknown. Some say it was a clinic. Others say low-income housing. No one really knows, but over time, it became the perfect place for other activity. He talked about how it became a drug den, how bodies were found here, how the upper floors were never finished, how the location made it a magnet for crime because no one ever came out this far. It was hard to pay attention. I couldn't stop looking at the dark upper windows, wondering who or what might still be inside. Mr. Stevenson said we could explore in pairs or small groups, but to be respectful and stay alert. Of course, that didn't happen. A few students immediately wandered off in groups of 2 or 3. Me and my friend Gianna, who everyone just called G, decided to stick together. Yeah, I'm a guy with a girl best friend. No drama, just real trust. And that day, I was beyond grateful she was with me. We entered the building and immediately felt the air change. It was stale, thick, and cold. Every footstep echoed longer than it should have. The lower floors were cluttered with broken chairs, old rusted doors, crushed cans, and random junk. But strangely, as we moved up a few levels, it started to clear out. Less trash, less graffiti, more open space. That's when I had a dumb idea. Let's go to the top, I said, just to say we did. G didn't want to. She said it felt off, but I pushed her. Come on, it's probably the only time we'll get to be somewhere like this. So we went. Steep, narrow, and sketchy. Each level we climbed, the structure seemed to get worse. By the time we reached what looked like the second highest floor, the walls were unfinished, the floors were soft and creaky, and beams were exposed in every direction. There were no stairs to the final floor, just a hole in the ceiling where a staircase used to be. The opening was just big enough for a person to climb through, if they had a way up. We walked carefully across the weak floorboards, stepping around holes and avoiding splintered beams. Then G stopped. She grabbed my shoulder. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I turned and followed her gaze. Above us, through the hole in the ceiling, was an arm. Just an arm. It was slowly waving, not frantically, not like someone trying to get our attention in a panic. No, this was calm, intentional. The kind of slow, eerie wave that makes your stomach drop. The arm was covered by a long black sleeve. The hand was bare, pale. Whoever it was, they were lying flat on the floor above us, completely still, just dangling the arm into view. Then came the sound, that ticking noise, like someone clucking their tongue, calling a cat, over and over. Tick, tick, tick. The hand kept motioning, slowly beckoning us up. "Okay," I said, backing away. "Nope, we're done." G nodded, already frozen in place. We turned to leave. That's when we heard the scrape, the sound of a shoe dragging fast across old wood. The person above us had stood up. I didn't wait to find out what came next. "Go," I whispered, and G bolted. We made our way back to the staircase, trying not to fall through any of the holes. But we weren't alone. A sudden crash echoed from behind us. Someone had just jumped down. We spun around. Across the room, standing with his back to us, was a man. Dirty clothes, slouched shoulders. Then he turned his head, just his head, and locked eyes with us. He didn't look like a fellow explorer. He looked unstable, dangerous. "Run," I said. "Now." We sprinted down one floor, then another. Each time I looked back up the stairwell, I saw him, still watching, still following, getting closer. By the time we hit the third floor, I yelled again, "Go, faster." We hit the ground level and burst out of the building. Outside, I looked back one last time, but he was gone. We found Mr. Stevenson by the bus, casually talking to another student. When he saw our faces, sweaty, shaking, out of breath, he stopped. "What happened?" he asked. We told him everything. The arm, the ticking noise, the man chasing us. He scolded us at first for going too high, but I could tell even he was rattled. He rounded up the rest of the students, did 3 head counts, just to be sure everyone was there, and we left. Back on the bus, G sat beside me, silent. I laughed, partly from adrenaline, mostly from relief. "We're alive," I said, trying to shake it off. She didn't laugh, not even a smile. She was still looking out the window at the building as it disappeared behind the trees. And I couldn't help but wonder, who was the man watching from the top floor, and what would have happened if we'd climbed just a little higher?